Um, and welcome to this meeting of the Council's Cabinet. And the exciting bit of news about it is it'll be webcast. So as they say on Channel 4, no swearing please, we're being webcast. Before we start these proceedings, though, I need to bring your attention to a couple of housekeeping matters. There's no expected fire alarm testing here today, so if the fire alarm does go off, it's everyone for themselves. Please follow the fire and emergency proceedings that are dotted around this place. Can I ask, and this is probably note to self, if you use your microphone when using the when speaking, it's great if you do that, because then we can all hear you. But even better, we don't want to hear you when you finish. So could you switch it off, if that's all right? And could I ask for your mobile devices to be turned to silent, please? Okay. So, as I say, welcome to the first meeting of the Labour-controlled City Council. It's our first one for a couple of years. And hopefully the start of exciting things for Plymouth. I'm going to start by asking if there are any apologies for today's meeting, please.
Through you, Chair, there's apologies received from Councillor Sudan.
Thank you very much indeed. Apologies from Sudan. Are there any declarations of interest on any item on today's agenda? Well, it doesn't look like it. Thank you very much. Now, before we move to the minutes of the last meeting, could I please ask, since we last met as a council and as a cabinet, a previous chair of this cabinet and vice chair of this cabinet, the former councillor Vivian Pengelly and Alderman Ted Fry have both passed away. I wondered if we could stand in silence for a minute, please, in memory of them. So, it's my great pleasure to ask if I can sign the minutes of the last meeting on the 9th of March, not that I was there, as a true record. Is that okay? You can nod if you want. Yep, that's good. Yep, I think that's a yes. Thank you very much. So, next item 4, is questions from the public. This is just one of the many ways in which we listen to and engage with residents in Plymouth. It says here, question is from Mr. Mike Sheaf, who's here with us today.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity for putting the question. The statutory time limit for public authorities to respond to freedom of information requests is 20 working days. How many responses to requests received by Plymouth City Council are currently outside of this time limit? And by what date do you expect the City Council to meet the statutory time limit?
Normally this question would be answered by our governance portfolio holder, which is Councillor Sudan. So it falls to me to be her deputy today and answer your question. So as of the 26th of May 2023, the Council has 48 freedom of information requests that are overdue. It is not possible to provide an exact date when all of these will be complete due to the various dates that they were sent in and the complexity of some individual responses. The Council receives over 1,100 such requests every year, which equates to 5 every working day. Not every request can be fulfilled within the statutory timescale due to the complexity of some requests, and of course fluctuations in daily volumes received. And as a result, there will be variations in the number that are overdue on a daily event of all requests in 2022-23 within those timescales. And that's the answer to the question.
Thank you very much, very helpful.
We move to Chair's urgent business. I'm not aware of having any urgent business at this point. So I will move then to leaders' announcements, which is item number 6. Previous watchers of this slot will know that it could take a while. So I'm going to break with tradition and just give you some of them, not all of them. And I can see the sigh of relief around the table straight away. But if I could say that, you know, it has been an amazing couple of weeks, which ended last week with the announcement that we secured a £25 million health investment in Colin Campbell Court. And that is a net zero investment as well. Mark's going to lead on that in a bit. I didn't want to steal all of his thunder, just some of it. So I want to talk about the first big one is a £19 million investment in Derryford. So I signed an executive decision to unlock a project that actually started by Labour, Town 4 when we were in, but it was stalled under the Conservatives. I improved the £19 million investment in the next phase of the Derryford District Centre from our Property Regeneration Fund. Now that's going to see Marks and Spencer's getting a brand new food store, double the size of their existing store. It will also see a new EV charging site, which I think is particularly exciting. But even more exciting than that is that the deal's gone unconditional. So it ain't just fluff, it ain't just announcements, it's actually gonna happen legally. Devon contractors will be starting very soon, so I expect there'll be a photo opportunity. Mark or myself might do that one. If I can persuade Mark to do it, I will. Devon contractors will be starting very soon, as I say. This is going to provide a heart for the north of the city. And it's also going to create 100 permanent jobs, and there'll be 120 construction jobs while the work's going on. So the other reason for mentioning the property investment fund is because it'll actually generate an income for the council going forward, in addition to any business rates that we might be talking about. So, you know, this really follows up on our securing the range, which is their national headquarters, which we did in 2019. So with this, I think the Derryford District Centre is kind of nearly there, probably complete, I think, which would be fantastic. And a really a big deal for people who live in Derryford. The next piece of great news is the PwC Good Growth Report. We don't normally feature in these, but actually PwC do an annual roundup of all the growth in the cities. And this year they looked at COVID recovery and good growth. So I'm really excited to tell you that they rank Plymouth's economy as the 5th highest in the UK for good growth, with a particularly strong performance in income distribution, work-life balance and transport. All of those things were kind of tenets to our Resurgam action plan, which is our COVID recovery plan, which for some reason the Conservatives renamed the Plymouth plan, not to be confused with the Plymouth plan. But Plymouth is also ranked #1 for the most improved city, with the overall highest overall change to the good growth score from last year to the current year. The work undertaken by this authority when we were in that Resurgam programme was mentioned as a case study. So we laid some really solid foundations, Chris, and your work with partners like the Social Enterprise Partnership and others has really stood us in good stead. I think it's important to say just how hard this council worked during COVID on the economic side. Our economic development team and our treasury team getting money out the door to keep businesses alive has stood us in good stead. And of course, unlike the government, our record on fraud on COVID grants was pretty good, pretty watertight amongst local authorities. So the next one is the National Marine Park Capital Investment Plan. Now, we won this money from the Heritage Lottery Fund. Plan is now to kind of bring everything together under one roof. We've had the nod from the Heritage Lottery that that's okay, that we don't have to maintain separate bank accounts, as it were, or separate governance, as it were. And that's really going to help us to focus as we move the National Marine Park forward. So basically, we had a year-long listening exercise at the National Marine Park to see what people felt was important that they needed to see. So it's things like, what we'll be doing is, there's a Napoleonic fort over at Mount Edgecombe. That's the battery. So we're going to do a project there, and also another one at Mountbatten, where we're going to get that sort of fortification in a state where it's got interpretation for visitors and everything. At the moment, it's kind of unloved, but it could be such an attraction for locals when we do that. We're going to bring a number of derelict buildings back at Tyneside as well. And really exciting, we're going to have this sun terrace with the most magnificent view over Plymouth Sound, even on a bad day. We're going to be making other improvements to Mountbatten as well, with a recasting of the Mountbatten Water Sports Centre, bringing the showers and changing room facilities up to the 21st century as well. That'll be really good, but also some significant eating opportunities there to increase the dwell time. So basically, all of this is going into a stage 2 bid. We've got every right to believe that it'll be accepted, and we're hoping to start work on site in 2024 on all of that stuff, which is going to be really thrilling. The other thing I wanted to say is I've attended for the first time a Freeport meeting, and I'm really pleased that I did, because there's been a lot of, how can I say this, a bit of misinformation going on about Freeports. Certainly our Freeport. I can't speak for other Freeports, but this one here is different from the other 7 in many ways. One, it's not a container port. Number 2, it is around building on what we've already got here. So that means working with fully unionised firms like Babcock Marine and Princess Yachts. And that's why our trade unions have been involved from day one. I've had meetings with them when I was in opposition and before to assure them that this is a project about good quality jobs, not cheapjack jobs. And that's why it'll help secure those businesses in Plymouth and help them to grow. But there's a lot of excitement around the fact that we are in a perfect position here to start using the Freeport to incentivise firms to come here who are involved in marine and green technology. If you think about our proximity to the Celtic Array, at the moment there's Scottish firms marketing themselves as being approximate to the Celtic Array. We're right next door and we're not doing that. So we need to do that because there are huge opportunities with the Celtic Array. But before that, one of the points that I had to raise at the Freeport meeting was about the perilous state of the national grid in Plymouth, or rather in the East South West Peninsula. And the fact that plugging in basic new infrastructure is really hard with it being the state it's in. So much so that there's a real threat that the Celtic Array will be plugged into Wales rather than into Cornwall or North Devon, which would be tragic, I think, for all the firms who are anticipating us to be able to capitalise on this. So one of the things that was agreed at the Freeport meeting last week was that we're now going to pursue the improvements to the national grid with some vigour. This is something we've tried to do in a number of other arenas, like the LEP, without success. But we have to make this happen, because otherwise all our ambitions around decarbonisation for the peninsula and certainly the decarbonisation of energy is going to fall foul of a lack of infrastructure investment into the national grid. Keep you posted on that. Okay, so that's the end of my announcements. I'd like to move now to individual cabinet member updates, if there are any. I'm going to look around the room and look to my left.
Yes, please.
And Jemima, would you bring us up to speed on what you've been up to, please?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I've got a few cabinet announcements. First one is I want to mark a very special milestone, as this is the first cabinet meeting since the box welcomed its 500, I knew I was getting this wrong, 500,000th visitor. So more than 500,000 people have now visited the box. This is on the back of an amazing year where we welcomed just short of 250,000 visitors. I think there are two factors that make this even more special. Our old museum welcomed on average 80,000 visitors per annum. So this is a huge step up. We opened during COVID, and for the first 18 months, the box opened with restrictions. Most new attractions have a brilliant year and then plateau. So it's fantastic to see the box visitor numbers growing. So I want to talk about the summer programme that's coming to the box, Summer of Colour and Light. It's the new summer season at the box, which will be open to the public from the 24th of June. We have 3 shows under this banner, Summer of Light and Colour, built around the 300th anniversary of Joshua Reynolds, who founded the Royal Academy, one of Plymouth's most famous sons. Rana Begum is a 21st century Royal Academician, and we also have the story of Solomon Hart and a picture lost in our archives for almost 100 years by the most important 19th century Jewish artist who was a Plymouth resident. And again, also a Royal Academician. The current president of the Royal Academy, Rebecca Salter, who is the first female president, will be coming to Plymouth to open the show. So there's 3 parts to it. There's Reframing Reynolds, a celebration. Rana Begum, her exhibition is called Dappled Light. And Solomon Hart, where we'll be looking at his enormous painting, The Execution of Lady Jane Grey. It's a world-class show that could only happen here at the box, and the only national show celebrating Reynolds' 300th anniversary as one of Europe's finest portrait painters. And my final announcement is that the LGA Culture, Tourism and Sport Board will be paying a visit to Plymouth. I'm really excited about this because along with Tudor, I'll be hosting the first ever visit of the LGA Culture Board to Plymouth on the 21st of June. The board have chosen to visit Plymouth to hear about our cultural journey and will be hosted at Market Hall, at TR2 and at the box. The board brings together cultural portfolio holders from across the UK, and it's a very prestigious visit. In particular, they've highlighted Plymouth as best practice for cultural placemaking and our partnership working. And along with Tudor and myself, the board will receive an update from Lindsay Hall, who is the chair of Plymouth Culture, and James Mackenzie Blackman, who is the CEO of Theatre Royal Plymouth. It's going to be a really exciting visit. Can't wait to boast about what we've done in Plymouth and what we're going to do in Plymouth. Thank you, Leader.
That's lovely. Thanks very much indeed, Jemima. Sally Hayden.
Thank you, Leader. I've just got a couple. But to start with, last Thursday, the 8th of June, the bereavement services invited their staff, counsellors and partners from the funeral industry to join them on their first open day for tours of the site. For Plymouth City Council, the new crematorium, which will be known as The Park, and it is set to open in spring 24. In addition to this, we have the site will benefit from a new cafe, which will open to serve refreshments for people attending funerals and also those visiting the site to pay their respects. It will also be available for families for hire of wakes and other events. Leader, you probably know I probably could talk all cabinet on our new crematorium, which is going to be known as The Park. So we just need to keep saying The Park, not the new crematorium. But I'll leave it there. There'll be lots more coming. But I would like to move on to some more exciting news, the purple flag. We were first awarded the Purple Flag 5 years ago. Plymouth City Council was the first council to receive the Purple Flag on their first application. It's not happened before. So the Purple Flag status for the evening and nighttime economy areas has been renewed. Plymouth continues to impress as a leading nighttime economy management. It is shining endorsements for the partnership in Plymouth that the high level of strategic commissioning addressing the violence against women and girls in the city. Note that due to the excellent work being achieved by the partnership, there were no recommendations made. Response from violence against women and girls survey shows a feeling of unsafe in the city with 79%, avoiding certain streets when out, 84% outlining improved lighting as a way to feel safe. It is positive to see the work being done through Safer Streets funding to address these concerns. As we move forward, we will continue to work to increase the confidence of the general public to return and continue using the evening and nighttime economy. The use of the support services like the Safe Bus, nighttime patrols, street pastures, drink spiking reports will continue and widely support to ensure all areas able to be safely used in the evening nighttime economy areas. That's fantastic news for the city that we were able to keep that with no recommendations. And my final one is I'm really proud today that we're going to be signing the Community Safety Charter. Plymouth City Council is to announce that we'll be signing the Community Charter. The Community Safety Charter is a scheme which sits under the Neighbourhood Watch banner. The aim is to improve a wide range of local organisations, charities, businesses and groups in crime prevention activity and to attend the scope of this work to forward a goal for antisocial behaviour. So we will promote a culture that does not tolerate antisocial behaviour, harassment, intimidation, hostile towards others, enable others to identify and take active stance against these crimes and incidents, report, actively encourage and support those who are experiencing or witnessing these crimes and incidents to report them to the relevant authorities. Again, I could go on. I won't because I know you've got a busy cabinet, but just to show that's the sort of the charter that we'll be doing. And I'm sure Councillor Coker will probably follow me with some other work that we've been doing, Leader. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Sally, and that is a good list you've given us there for this afternoon. Thank you. You'll be doing some more work on the charter in due course. Right, I've got Mark Lowry next.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm looking to talk about something that perhaps may delay your visit to Councillor Hayden's crematorium or park, as she's now referred to it, which is you would have heard on Friday that the council made an announcement around a community diagnostic centre due to open in our city. That is an investment of £25 million in a net zero new building. It will be a significant investment in the west end of our city centre. But what does that actually mean? Well, if you need an MRI or a CAT scan or an X-ray or lung cancer screening, ultrasound, audiology, ECG, and the list goes on and on and on. And why is that important? Well, actually, if you were to live in St. Peter's in the waterfront, the average life expectancy is 77 years, which is roughly 7.5 years less than other areas in our city. And we all know if you can access services easily, then those diagnostics that come along with it are usually prompt as well, and therefore preventing people and preventing that inequality that currently exists in our city around life expectancy. So it's fantastic news for those who live in St. Peter's in the waterfront, but equally, we're talking about somewhere in the region of over 100,000 diagnostic tests a year. So it's not just for those who are fortunate enough to live nearby, or unfortunate enough in reality, I suppose, but it is great news for the city as a whole. And how did we get to this place? Well, we've been working with University Hospital Plymouth for some time, and I'm pleased to say in our administration we submitted an application for this diagnostic centre immediately, and we have been successful. And it is also an opportunity for us to start to generate not just footfall, but the wider regeneration of our city centre in that part of town, which we know has been a struggle for us for many years. And along with the diagnostic centre itself, it is our intention to continue the provision of additional healthcare facilities in this part of the city. So I'd like to think in time we'll be able to make further announcements around the creation of a health village in the West End that doesn't just provide these diagnostics that we referred to today, but opportunities for people to access GP surgeries, pharmacies, dental health provision, sexual health provision, and so on and so forth. So in the future, I hope to be able to make further announcements about the redevelopment of that part of our city centre. It's taken us some time. We've had a few missteps along the way, but I'm pleased to say that this investment is a start. There will be more to come. And I think it's important to point out this would not have happened without the council, because this building isn't being built in fresh air. It's being built on land owned by the council that has purchased businesses in that part of the town, has demolished them, and is providing the land to the hospital to enable this to happen. So without the council and our hard work over the past few weeks, this scheme would simply not have materialised, regardless of what others may say. Okay, so I'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Well, that's excellent news. I think it's important as well because I think I saw in the paper there was a conflation between what we were trying to achieve with the Cavell and this. This is a different proposition from the Cavell, and it's important we make that distinction. What you're saying today is, let's call it son or daughter of Cavell, will be coming, we'll be making sure it does. We're going to leave no stone unturned on starting that race for that project now. Congratulations. I hope it's not premature, but I mean, we have very good reason to believe that this is now going to happen, rather than as some things have happened in the past. Mark, sorry. I'm sorry.
But I failed to mention the dates because there is an important equation here. The first date that's important is September 23, which is obviously not very long away. And how on earth can we build a building in such a short period of time? We can't, of course, and we won't be attempting to do so. But what there will be is temporary facilities on site to enable those diagnostics to take place as soon as possible, whilst we go through the process of designing and building a building to go on that site. You did mention the Conveyor Centre. That was something that was very close to this administration's heart. We worked for many years, starting back in 2018. And I was delighted when government was so impressed with what we proposed to do down there that they took this project and turned it into a national-wide project, and it was subsequently referred to as a Cavell Centre. And government actually spent millions of pounds taking that project forward. So it was disappointing to see it shelved. And like you say, we have a step forward here now in respect to this diagnostic centre. But there will be further announcements that this council will be making to create a health village in that part of the town. And equally, as you've heard me say before, it isn't just about the safe of the city. You know, I hope to meet with health partners in the coming months to look at providing much improved health provision for other areas within our city, so we can rebalance the scales and ensure that the inequality that I referred to, that also happens in other parts of our cities, is addressed.
Thanks very much indeed, Mark. Mark Coker.
Thank you, Chair. Two announcements. One is to follow up with Councillor Hayden and us signing up to the Neighbourhood Watch National Charter. Today, along with Councillor Hayden and Plymouth City Bus, we've launched on all our go-ahead buses in Plymouth the charter and how to take part to make people feel safer on our public transport. And when you consider nearly 14 million journeys are made each year on Plymouth buses, that's a wide-ranging audience, and I would encourage everyone. I've joined up myself as an individual, and it's allowed me to communicate to community events that I represent in Devonport how to join up and get some useful tips. But also I'd like to pay tribute to Councillor Kevin Sproston, who's not here today because he's on holiday. Both myself and Kevin approached Plymouth City Bus in January of this year to say, could we work together? And we're the first bus and Plymouth City Council that have done this in the country, to my knowledge. So I think that's a really good bonus for a forward-thinking Plymouth. Secondly, and as everyone in this room knows, this subject is very close to my heart. We started a campaign last year when we heard that Mount Wise swimming pools would be chargeable. I'm pleased to say that the pools opened a couple of weeks ago with no charge. We kept our promise to the residents, not only of Devonport, but the city, to be able to have much needed access to the water, and also for social and mental health isolation. I've spent a lot of time at Mount Wise pools, both this year and last year, talking to the people that use the pools, and it's all ages, all different types of people from all over the city who actually, if we'd introduced charges, practically wouldn't have been able to afford to use it. So I think we've hit the ground running as a Labour administration. We promised to do this, and we did it within the first week of returning to power. But I would also like to thank Dr. Ruth Hurl and Plymouth Active Leisure, who I've been working with for a number of months to get into a position to do this. So I think there are two good points there, Chair, for after 3 weeks in charge.
Not bad, we'll have to go some to beat you. No, I'm not going to ask Sally or Tom because their powder's been kept dry for later, but Mary, you've got something?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Many of you will remember that in December 2019, a Plymouth Oral Health Needs Assessment was commissioned because we were concerned about the dental health within our city. We then held scrutinies about it, which were sort of fairly wide apart because of COVID causing mayhem, but we then have looked again at the dental health needs within Plymouth, and one of the things that now concerns me, that when I first looked at this back in 2019, you were talking about 9,000 people on the NHS dental waiting list. We're now up to over 21,000. Which is quite horrendous when you think about it, and we certainly know that the NHS dentistry within Plymouth is contracting. So what we decided that we wanted to be one of our targets for our campaign this summer was to make sure that we launched a dental task force. And Leader, I'm really pleased to be able to say that we were able to get the letters out at the end of last week, inviting people, and I've had acceptances from quite a few. So that's really welcomed. One of the things that we do want is all three of the Plymouth MPs to be involved in this, and as such yet I haven't had anything back from them yet, so I'm hoping that they'll get onto that and their PAs will get onto that this week and we'll get a consent from them. So we're well on the way, and hopefully, quarterly we'll be able to report what we're up to and what we're doing and how we're moving things forward. and what improvements we can make. And certainly I shall be working with Councillor Mark Lowry to make sure that we're making use of the CDC and the future plans for down there to try and to push that along. So that's that, good news. And secondly, another of our concerns during the campaign recently was about how do we look after and treat and work with our older population. So one of the things that we want to do is to launch an ageing well agenda. And
I'll come back to that in a moment,
Excellent.
if I may.
yeah, so
I'll give you
we'll
a
be
bit, yeah, I'll give you
we'll
a
be
bigger,
doing
bigger
that.
platform in a minute.
So we'll be able to sort that out in a minute. So thank you, Leader. And I think that's the best for me for the moment.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, brilliant.
Sorry, Leader,
It's all right.
I forgot the most important thing
Yes,
here.
you did. Yes, you did. And
At
so did I.
the end of last week, I was able to put a video together and say a big thank you to all carers in Plymouth. That's adult carers and young carers, because of the wonderful work they do that keep people in their homes, but they also need to know that there are support services, etc., around for them. And so hopefully they'll be reminded to go and check our council website to get information about that. But a big thank you to all of those who help out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And for those of you that have the right equipment, you can watch that video over and over again to your heart's content. Yes. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so I'm going to move on, if I may, now to the next item, which is Cabinet Appointments 2023. Now, what a lot of people don't realise, that in addition to sitting around this table, the Cabinet members also get the joy of going to a number of other places and committees and panels because of their Cabinet status. So this report, which is from pages 21 through to 23, gives a big long list, and those of you who haven't yet put them in the diary, could I suggest that you do so? I'm just going to basically say that the list is there. These are, as I say, appointments that we have to basically let you know about. So what I'm doing now is asking you please confirm the appointments contained within the report. And this should last as long as you last this year as Cabinet members. Agreed? Marvellous. Thank you very much. The next item is number 9, and this is the corporate plan. I'm going to probably ask the Chief Executive to say 1 or 2 words after this as well. I'm introducing today the new City Council's corporate plan, which I hope we'll all agree, mainly because we kind of worked on it together, and I'm hoping you haven't changed your mind. Those of you with long memories may recall that back in 2013, it was a Labour administration that dispensed with many pages of, let's say, verbiage. You know, we used to have a lovely thick corporate plan. Some used it as doorstops, some used it as dust collectors on shelves. Very few people used it as a living, breathing document on how we actually run this place. So we went into basically a co-production, senior staff and senior councillors, on a corporate plan on a page. In order to do that, we needed a vision for the city that could be shared, values that we all agree on, that's been the core of how we acted, and a series of priorities for the council's activities that inform our planning, our decision making, and how we spend money and time. So that's what we did then, and that corporate plan on the page you've seen in many iterations. The last one is still hanging on for dear life on the walls, but not for much longer, I hope. So having taken our decision back then to boil the corporate plan down to, you know, the really important stuff, we then had to make sure that all of our members, our staff, our partner organisations really understood what it was in it and why. Most importantly, that everyone in the city can see our vision, the values, the priorities, so they can judge us, make sure that we live up to them, right? So if I can go through kind of what we're doing this time, it's retaining the vision that Britain's Ocean City will be one of Europe's most vibrant waterfront cities where no outstanding quality of life is enjoyed by everyone. That's been adopted by key partners as well, by which I mean, you know, the police and the fire and the universities and all of that. And it's as relevant now as it was back in 2013. We've spent some time looking at the values that we believe should govern the way in which the council acts. These have to be more than just words. So we try to be a bit clearer on what we mean when we say we believe in democracy, we believe in responsibility, we believe in fairness, and we believe in cooperation. And these values have to underpin the way that councillors and officers work. And we have to be prepared to be judged on whether we succeed or not. Clearly, there will always be people who disagree with our approach or our decisions, but that shouldn't prevent us from remaining a values-driven organisation. You know, we campaigned hard to be here. Labour was elected on 5 key pledges for building a better Plymouth. And again, it's only right and proper that these are reflected in the revised corporate plan, alongside our long-standing and vital commitments to keeping children, adults, and communities safe. So just to say what they are again, just in case you've forgotten from 6 weeks campaigning, crime and antisocial behaviour. Working with the police to tackle those. Potholes and cleaner streets. We'll improve the speed and number of potholes filled. Mark's really raring to go on that. And also a clean team to tackle hotspots of grot. New homes. We want to get more homes built again, not just for affordable purchase, but for affordable and reasonable social rent as well. Green investment, of course. Really significant, as I alluded to earlier on, and we've got a lot of things that we want to say about green investment over the next few weeks and months. In particular, talking as I did just now about the free port and the opportunities for clean, green and marine jobs. Health, we've talked a little bit about this, and this is a practical example of what we meant when we said that we're going to work with the health service to tackle some of the shortages, to see GPs and dentists. And of course, another important one is tackling the cost of living crisis. And this will be a piece of work that when Sue returns, she'll present probably sometime in July about how we're going to help minimise the cost of living crisis as best we can through our own work. And our ability to influence others. So, it's one page, there's a lot in it. What say you, Chief Exec? You're going to have to make it happen.
Well, hopefully we'll all make it happen. I think one of the key things about a plan on a page is there's no hiding places. It is absolutely clear what you want to achieve, and I think that's the great benefit of having a corporate plan that is so clear. If you've got a 100-page plan, there's loads of words you can put in there. That doesn't actually mean you deliver it. So one of the ways in which we use the corporate plan is to point to it, because it will be visible around our buildings. It'll be in all our on our IT systems and so on. And what we say to people, if you're doing the things on the plan, you're doing the right things. If you're doing some other things, we probably need to have a chat with you about what you are doing, because the corporate plan is absolutely the guiding light. And for us, in terms of budget setting and the direction of travel, we will use that corporate plan going forward. Inspectors, when they come in and inspect us, they will also say, what are the priorities of this organisation? And we will be able to very clearly point to those priorities. But the other benefit of having a corporate plan set out the way it is it's not just about what we want to achieve, but it's about how we achieve. And the values that we have and the way in which we make our decisions using those values are really important to us, and there will be more work to do to move those forward over the coming weeks and months. The corporate plan from here goes on to council. It's council's decision. It becomes council's corporate plan, and after that, subject to endorsement of full council, it would be widely communicated. Sitting underneath the corporate plan, though, have to be a series of action plans. What are we actually going to do to deliver? And Leader, you've already mentioned one of those, which is the cost of living plan, which we'll be working with Councillor Sudan on when she returns. And the performance metrics. So how do we hold ourselves to account to say things are changing and we're delivering? So there's a suite of performance metrics that we'll also be developing that sit underneath this plan. That's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Okay, so I suppose all I got to ask now is, because you kind of designed it, would you fancy supporting it? And then it'll go, as Tracy said, to the floor of the council for the next council meeting for adoption. And then, if we get through that hurdle, it'll go on the walls. So can I move the recommendations, which are on page 25 of the report, if that's all right? Is that agreed? Agreed. Oh, that's very kind of you. Right, I'm going to item 10 now, which is the, as I say, in the absence of Sudan, I am deputising upwards, as we do in this crazy world we're living in. And this is on the cost of living plan. So Ruth is online, so if I need to throw you a rugby hospital pass, I can do that, right? Excellent. During the run-up to the election, time and time again, we heard from voters that the cost of living crisis was hitting people in the city quite hard. On top of energy, food and fuel prices, mortgages have jumped hugely since the disastrous budget of August last year, which obviously, as you know, had a knock-on effect to rental costs as well. The government's own figures show that 20% of children living in low-income families need 3/4 of those actually are families, households in work. People are paying the price of this national crisis, working hard, paying more and getting less. And in Plymouth, the average wage, as you know, is well below the national average, so the impacts are all the more obvious. We know that in Plymouth, more people than ever are needing crisis support. Food banks, referrals, emergency charitable support have been more than 3 times higher over 2022-23 compared with the year before. Parents are going without food themselves so that they make sure that children are fed, and record numbers of people are needing support just to keep a roof over their heads, and more households than ever before are in temporary accommodation. Unfortunately, many of the decisions that could be helping people are not being made by the government. In fact, many of the decisions are worsening the crisis for many people, such as I mentioned, the disastrous budget, which led to escalating costs. On top of the 13 years of austerity, just seen measures which only this week have been demonstrated not to have helped any parents into work, but rather has driven up child poverty. But hearing all of the voters on the doorsteps telling us just how deep this has been in Plymouth, made us in Plymouth Labour resolve to do more where we can to support people through this crisis. So I've asked Councillor Sudan to lead a working group supported by council officials who will work with a wide range of organisations across the city who are on the front line, providing support and hearing of the issues to develop a cost of living action plan. The cost of living action plan will be reported back to Cabinet in 2 months in full, but I've also directed council officials to identify any actions that can be implemented more quickly and to deliver on those more urgently. So that's where we are. Ruth, is there anything that you'd like to add to that introduction?
Thank you very much, Leader. I think you've covered so many of those key points. I just wanted to make sure that people were very clear that even though inflation may be slightly dropping, the gap between income and outgoings that are really necessary for people to live is still increasing and is still a very, very major issue. So the cost of living is still going to be a very significant issue for Plymouth and for other areas for the foreseeable future, for a number of years. And we have modelling done over a couple of years which shows that a very significant number of our households in Plymouth will be struggling with this for some years to come. I'd just also like to make the point that some people think of this as a bit of a short-term issue, and perhaps the money is a little bit tight and you have to go without in the short term. I just want to be really clear that this is really damaging to health and to well-being, not just in the short term. And we do know that things like cold homes, though obviously talking about cold homes today might seem a little bit silly, but it'll be a very short time before we're going into winter again. And cold homes kill. There are quite a lot of people who are vulnerable to cold homes. It worsens circulatory problems, breathing problems, all of those sorts of things. But also, we do know that families are really struggling to make choices around healthier foods and things like that have potentially a longer lasting impact. And one of the really big issues is on well-being. So many people are reporting how their worries around money are really impacting their health and their mental health and their well-being, and is limiting their life in so many different ways. And that struggle, that mental well-being, it does play out in health impacts over a period of time. So there are some very significant issues there. We have some brilliant community and voluntary sector and other organisations across the city that want to do all that they can to help. And we will continue working with them very closely to understand what more we can be doing to support them and to support the families, the households, the individuals that we know are really struggling around this cost of living crisis, so that we can get those steps in place to get not just an action plan done and written down, as you say, but also to start delivering on those actions with immediate effect. And one of the particular areas that we're looking at the moment is the gap between those people who are eligible for a wider range of benefits, but who are not actually accessing those benefits. We need to understand why not and what we can do to support them in that, because if people are deserving of those benefits, then they really need them to be able to help them over a crisis such as this. So my very clear understanding, Leader, is that Councillor Sudan and I will be reporting back to you at the next Cabinet with our progress.
Thank you very much indeed, Ruth. Chris.
Thank you, Leader. I think over the last 12 years and however many administrations we've been doing, we have made a really conscious effort to try and tackle the systemic problems of poverty in the city. And that's a tough one because most of the levers are beyond our control, but we have been working on it and I think we've been doing well. And the good growth report that you talked about is an example of just that. How can we make employment pay for people and bring people on board and do things? However, the behaviour of government over the last couple of years has meant that a lot of that work's been unpicked, that a lot of the impacts that we were beginning to see have become even harder to see as people struggle on a day-to-day basis. I welcome this because obviously with a brief to tackle poverty, I'm interested in the long-term systemic things, but we also need to deal with the here and now. And I think that what this plan will enable us to do is do a lot of quick and dirty, in effect, dealing with the here and now, while still allowing all those other groups, like the group of key providers in the voluntary community sector, such as PEC and Citizens Advice and Together in Plymouth, to work with us on what some of the big structural changes we need to make, and work with the Growth Board and others on that, and the Child Poverty Group to do that, whilst we almost not forget the other bit, but allow the work that Sue is leading to actually tackle some of the day-to-day. So it would be easy to get distracted by today and forget that what we need to make sure is that the children of today don't end up bringing up their children in poverty in 10, 15, 20 years' time. And I think what we have here is a way of us tackling both at the same time by being really clear about cost of living, which is a crisis for today, and at the same time tackling poverty. And I think the trick that we'll be working on, and Ruth leading both bits of work as the CMT lead, is actually making sure that we get those balances right and put the right resources in the right places so that we don't forget one in dealing with the other, and we work on both together. And I think it's important for people to hear that we're not just going to deal with the here and now, we're going to deal with people's tomorrows as well. Thank you.
That's well said indeed. So there's a couple of things for us to do now, which is obviously to reinforce what we said about reporting back, that Sue comes back in August with the action plan at the latest. If it can be sooner, so much the better, as far as I'm concerned. And then agree the terms of reference that are set out in the paper. We've got to do that as well. And I'll put that to you now. So all those in favour of those recommendations? Thank you. That's agreed. Thank you. I'm going to move on now to item 11, which is Mary's going to talk to us about the Ageing Well agenda, which she nearly did earlier on. But we've got Ruth is here to amplify anything that needs amplifying from you, Mary. But if I could hand over to you now, please, to take us through the paper, which starts on page 51.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm delighted to present this new initiative for Plymouth to the Cabinet today. I'm sure many of us are aware that we are seeing a shift in the populations across the country, with increasing numbers of older people. Sometimes this is portrayed as some kind of problem or an issue, and we want to change that narrative and make sure that Plymouth is an accessible and inclusive city where everyone can thrive regardless of their age. This programme will be inclusive, and it will support and empower older residents to live life to the fullest and have a good quality of life, supporting people wherever their challenges might be. Although health and social care do play a role, we will be looking at all aspects of life throughout the framework developed by the Centre for Ageing Better. Through a citywide steering group, we will be able to identify the benefits of the many programmes that have been put in place over the years to support people as they age and to develop communities that support ageing well. However, we will also identify the areas where there are gaps and where we, as a city, could do better. The programme will enable us to work together as a city to improve and to ensure that Plymouth is a place where we support to age well, to have a good quality of life and play an active role with our friends and families and in the community. What do we mean by older people? Well, we're not defining that as a number. We know people of a particular age can feel very different from each other, and so we will be inclusive. Some of the issues that are more common in older age, mobility issues, sensory impairments, for example, can impact people at any age, and so, while focusing on older people, we hope many across the city will benefit. Thank you, Leader.
That's lovely. Thank you, Mary. Ruth, is there anything you want to add?
Just to say, this is obviously it's going to be a very interesting programme to do, and our first stages will be about talking to people to understand what is in place that works well for them and what more we need to do and what would bring benefit. So the report is very much setting out a framework and an approach that we will follow. And I think it's going to be really interesting for us to understand what are the sorts of things that people in Plymouth are asking for to help them to fulfil what's been expressed today.
I mean, we've tried tackling some of these issues before, but perhaps in silos, if I could say it like that. I think this is the first time that we've tried to do this in a more holistic way. And of course, we're not starting from scratch here. There's a lot of good work around and a lot of good practice to follow, which we'll be doing. Well, thank you, Ruth, and thank you, Mary. The recommendations on this are basically laid out in the report. There's 4 altogether, and we're giving you 6 months to come back. I'm not saying it's got to be finished in 6 months, but you know, I think there's a reasonable prospect that you might be able to do that. As I say, but 6 months would give you certainly a lot of meat in the sandwich in terms of reporting back, I think. Okay, so those recommendations then, 1, 2, 3, 4, are laid out in the paper. Can I see all those in favour, please? Thank you. That's agreed. Right, we will now move on to item 12, which is entitled Provisional Capital and Revenue Outturn Report 22-23. I know those of you who are very quick off the mark will ask how on earth are we going to do this, given the fact that we weren't in charge in 22-23. But as Councillor Lowry has done this on more than one occasion, due to the metronomic Plymouth politics, Mark, would you like to enlighten us?
Yes, thank you, Leader. As you said, I have done this on numerous occasions, so I'm certainly not going to take any credit for a vast majority of what you see before you today, which starts effectively on page 60. So you'll be aware there's a requirement of law for the council to balance its books, and I'm pleased to say on this occasion the council has been able to do that. And that is never an easy accomplishment, regardless of the administration. And in all fairness, I think we can all agree last year did throw up some very unusual surprises, particularly around the cost of energy, of course, which had a considerable impact upon this council. Additionally, of course, we've just discussed previously the cost of living rises and inflation and mortgage rates and interest rates and so on and so forth. So they had their fair share of challenges this year, and they've overcome many of those challenges, which was effectively about £20 million worth during this financial year. They have drawn down some £9.8 million of usable reserves throughout this year, and 1.1 million of corporate adjustments through capitalisation. That's what that effectively means, is what was a revenue expenditure has been subsequently moved over to a capital expenditure, which takes the pressure off our revenue budget. So also some good news. Thankfully, the council hasn't drawn down from its working balances that remain at some £8.4 million. And obviously, it's been our intention over the past few years to increase that. That's very challenging in an environment that keeps throwing some complex challenges at us, actually, in all fairness. And those are set out in the papers. If you go to page 61, of course, you'll just see some highlight examples of the increase in utility costs throughout this year, which those alone have been quite substantial. If you go to page 63 and table 2, you will see the end of year revenue outturn by directorate. And as you can see, a number of directorates have overspent, and thankfully a number have underspent, which of course puts us in a position where there's nil variance. As always, these overspends are challenges that not just reflect where we are today, but potentially have an impact on where we are moving forward. So we need to be very mindful of those overspends, because there is a distinct likelihood, if they happened last year, that they might well happen again this year. And as you can see, there's the Chief Executive's Office, Customer Services, and Children's Services. In many instances, I use the word blame. You can't necessarily blame the department. Sometimes there are circumstances outside the department that make these issues arise, but nevertheless, we need to be mindful of them going forward to make sure they don't unbalance us in the year coming forward as well. I would implore all council members to read this lovely report. I know not everybody loves to read financial reports as much as myself, but nevertheless, there's a lot of information here that's relevant to all departments and the way in which this council functions and the way in which it will function in the future. But moving on from the revenue position, we also set out what's called our capital programme. So these are major projects like roads and buildings and housing, and That outturn is set out on table 1 on page 66. And as you can see, we had a planned expenditure of some £189 million, but the actual was £86 million. So we basically sort of spent half of what we planned to spend, which in itself doesn't sound brilliant, but once again, sadly on this occasion, there were a number of challenges that happened in the year. Disruption to the supply chain, labour shortage, and particularly high inflation in the construction industry, which has had some impact. So that is the capital and revenue budget for last year. I would say the way in which you manage the finances of the council dictate the report you have before you, and I would implore people that when we are managing this budget going forward, the most important thing we can do as members is to make decisions early. The longer you leave them, the more costly they become. And if I were to be slightly churlish, part of the reason they had a number of challenges that were quite so difficult was because they didn't make the decisions in a timely manner. So it's really important moving forward that we make these decisions that come before us as soon as we possibly can, thereby saving the money. And that is our job, really. So finally, I would like to pay thanks to all those involved in doing this, because regardless of what side of the fence you sit on politically, it's never an easy job on behalf of the council and managing the budget. So well done to all those involved, and thank you very much for your hard work.
Thanks very much indeed, Mark. Now, David, you had an hospital pass given to you sometime in the course of this year, didn't you? And thank you for picking up the ball and running with it. Is there anything you want to add to what Mark said?
Thank you, Nina. I think you summed that up, as always, very eloquently, Mark. The point I just pick up that you brought into the conversation there is about this is the backward look. We have to make sure now that we've learnt the lessons from the overspends and the pressures, and that we're dealing with those as we go forward. So I'll make sure that I keep you in particular, but the rest of the Cabinet informed. So as you say, you get the opportunity to take alternative action if and when required.
We start from the position of being almost 2 months into the new financial year when we take over. So it's really important early on that Cabinet members are asking these questions in their portfolio meetings once a month at least about where we are on budget, getting control of the budget and making sure, because you know the position we're in is there isn't enough money, you know, if I could say that out loud. You know, we're in year 13 and a half of austerity. You know, we're way past making sure that the tea service is cancelled and the biscuits are no longer bought. As somebody described the other day, we're into the bone of public services now. So this isn't easy, and what it means is that we have to make really difficult decisions, and decisions that probably most of us around this table wish we didn't have to make. It's not why we came into this in the first place. But the reality is we're the only part of public sector that has to balance its books every year. However daft that may seem, the health service can overspend. Everybody can overspend except us. We have to make the books balance. I still don't know why they picked on us, but they have. So this is why we have to keep doing this year after year after year. So that corporate plan that we had adopted a few minutes ago, should the council agree, it will be the set of values that will help us keep track and keep on course with the budget as well as everything else. So I think we need to thank David particularly and his team for the work they've done over the last 12 months, not just for the report today, but this is a very big day, I think, the end of term report. But it's down to you from now on, Mark, in partnership with all of us around this table, to make sure that we keep the budget on track. I think, you know, if you look at paragraph 1.3, just to give members of the public, the thousands who are watching right now, a flavour of what we're dealing with as a local authority, those electricity costs the life centre, street lighting, the crematoria and utility across the estate together, all together, add up to nearly £4 million in extra costs that we weren't expecting. That's a hell of an increase to swallow. I mean, like every household in the city is having to deal with increased electricity costs, but it gives you a flavour that the council is not immune either and has nowhere to go to recover those costs. So, can I ask you to pass the recommendations, please, which is 1, 2 and 3 in the report. All those in favour, please? Thank you. And I think that is that. We will now move on to item 13. 13 is another one of those which are not asked of, in the sense that, as you know, the Local Government Association basically are pioneers of sector-led improvement. And the Corporate Peer Challenge Programme is very much part of that sector-led improvement agenda. So we had back last year we had a very high-profile team, I think, who had to do quite a bit of it online, I think, and couldn't get all the way down here for a variety of reasons. But Sean Davis, who's the brand new Labour chair of the Local Government Association, because Labour's now the largest party in local government for the first time since 2014. Sean was part of the team and who did their work in 2022. And then they came back for a review, as they do after a few months, to see if we were behaving ourselves all right, if we were putting into practice the things that they suggested to us that they should do. Although we weren't leading the council at that point, I was involved and others, I think, some of the shadow cabinet, as was then, some of you took part in the review. In fact, the external scrutiny review that was recommended was largely a result of Councillor Penderfy's feedback as a key scrutiny chair at the time. So well done you. And the praise for the budget scrutiny was in large measure down to your work. They particularly wanted you to know that, just in case you didn't. Has anybody told you that? They should have. The challenge team, they acknowledged the progress the council was making against their recommendations, also understood there were major challenges being faced here as well, alongside all of local government, in fact. They recognised the major constraints in our own resources and the aforementioned cost of living crisis. So our new corporate plan sort of reflects the priorities for the next 3 years, sets out the framework under which we will take some of these recommendations forward. Because, it wasn't a document for the past, it was a document for the present and the future. And so it's important that we carry on those improvements, because they are a solid foundation for our future as a new administration. So I think it's important, that we don't take these on the chin, because it's not like that. What it is a bunch of people who work like we do, who are councillors and officers in other local authorities, some of whom are sort of oases of best practice in themselves, and others who know a best practice when they see it. So the advice they give is really worth taking, basically, and the recommendations they made are in all seriousness. Now, you were Chief Executive all the way through this and now, so what say you, Chief Executive?
Thanks very much. And peer reviews are incredibly important to us in getting that external view on how we're doing. And as you say, Leader, the peers came in February 22 and had to do it online. I think some of the team had COVID, so we ended up with an online. So it was great to see them back last February. This is coming to you now as the effectively the first meeting after the finalisation of their report. So it's the first meeting available to present this, because one of the deals with a peer review is that the reports are made public. That's really important in terms of that openness and transparency. And you'll see from the report that they found that we had made some good progress in very challenging circumstances. And you've just had the report on the budget, and particularly the budget was exercising us, continues to exercise us, but was particularly exercising us at the time. And so it's great to see that and to see the progress we've made in that area, but so many other parts of the council. You'll see in the report the updates that one of the areas that they have highlighted is capacity to deliver. And when you think about the budget challenges we've had last year in setting the budget this year, we are under huge pressure in terms of capacity. So the corporate plan is vital in making sure, as I was saying earlier, that we are really clear on what your priorities are, and we are focused on those priorities, because the capacity is just reduced and continues to reduce. What we're planning to do, Leader, and you're asked to note it, is rather than having a further different action plan and having action plans laid on top of other action plans, what we'd like to do in association with having the new corporate plan is to produce what we're calling it's an internal document. It's an internal organisational effectiveness document. How do we become the best organisation we can to deliver those priorities and bring together in one place an updated people plan, our asset plan, our financial plans, and so on, so they're all working together, very much focused on delivery for the people of this city. So that is the recommendation, Leader.
Thanks very much. I mean, the team we had here for the review was quite a good team, really. Teresa O'Neill, Bexley, and Sean I mentioned, but also Mike Harris from Southampton, chief exec there, and all pulled together by Catherine from the LGA. And don't forget, we've got we've got the change of control sort of development program as well. So there's lots. I'm hoping that we kind of interleave stuff, because there'll be things arising out of this that we need help with, and we can roll that into development work for new members, and for that matter for existing members. So I think this is all going to meld together quite nicely, actually. If we, it sounds as if we've got a cunning plan to do that, so that's good. Okay, so the recommendations are there to note, and I think that I'll just ask you to vote in favour of that, if you wouldn't mind. Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, so continuing on the improvement journey, we have a very important item now, number 14, which is the Children's Services Improvement Plan. And the plan is quite a thick one, I think it's fair to say. There's nearly 100 pages of it. But, there's a lot of improvement to do. What can I say? So Sharon's here, of course, director, and we've got Jemima, the portfolio holder. So perhaps if I could ask Jemima to start the proceedings on this, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'll just give a bit of context. You'll be aware that Plymouth Children's Services have been told that we need to improve the quality of our services. And this Cabinet paper provides you with the information regarding the Department for Education's improvement notice, the subsequent creation of an improvement board, which was established in March, and a copy of the current improvement plan. We're being supported in this work by Dorset Council as our sector-led improvement partner, and the improvement board is chaired by Teresa Levy from Dorset. Teresa and her team are working closely with Sharon Muldoon, who is our Director of Children's Services, and our team to deliver the improvements that we need to make at pace and in a sustainable fashion so that in time the improvement notice can be lifted. Finally, we're expecting an ILAC Ofsted inspection, which is an inspection of our children's services in the autumn, and the Children's Services team are working hard to be inspection ready and to improve its services as outlined in the plan. I want to say that it is so important that we get this right for our children. And going back to the corporate plan that we were talking about earlier, we talk about making Plymouth the best place to grow up and to grow old in. And this work is vital to achieving that for our children. I'm going to hand over to Sharon now so that she can talk through and highlight some of the key points of our plan. Thank you.
Thank you. So quite right, it is a detailed plan, but that's because we have a number of very complex services within Children's Services social care space. In terms of the Universal Improvement Plan, there are 6 areas of focus that we, as a team and as an organisation and as a corporate entity, really need to get right for our children's services. They are listed in the plan, but the first one is around governance, leadership and management. So that's making sure that we have the right oversight, the right quality of information, the right leadership plans in terms of how we will improve our services. There are a set of key actions there. The next few areas of the plan really talk about the services that our children in Plymouth would experience. So priority number 2 is around early help and the front door being the multi-agency safeguarding hub. So early help, as you know, is a key priority for us in the city to provide early support for our children and families when they need it, and to look to provide that resource to reduce the demand into statutory social care services. So we have identified a number of actions, and indeed we were working on these actions from November of last year to improve our early help offer. We have made significant investment in our early help services, and we have reorganised and refocused our early help teams to be in localities. A big piece of work of this is about our relationship and our engagement with schools, and we've worked very hard this year to build those relationships. On the 26th of April, we had a citywide event where all schools came to a day session where we talked around what more we need to do to improve services. That included picking up some of our priority actions around consent and threshold. That is making sure that we've got the agreement, the right agreement to either work with parents or to make safeguarding referrals. The front door, which is the MASH, which was a focused visit inspection that colleagues you'll be aware of in December, has its own unique plan. That plan is reviewed on a bi-monthly basis, and we are making good progress against the improvement areas. Specifically to bring to your attention, we had a requirement to improve at speed our initial child protection conference timeliness. We had a very low base in December. Since January, we have maintained 100%. Last month it dropped to 94.7, but that's one family where we needed to just delay a conference. So we have seen and continue to see green shoots in that area. Across the system, we know that we need to do more, which is priority number 3, to have robust and effective social work practice. I'm very proud of our practitioners in the city. They have much heart and passion for the work that we do, but we need to do more to support them. And so for that end, we have been working with the team managers, since January of this year in a series of professional development programmes and some restorative practice training to really make sure that we refocus back on our practice and that our social workers can be the best that they can be. Priority number 4 is around how we support our children in care and our care leaver experienced children and young people. This is probably a more stable part of the service in terms of workforce. However, we know there was more that we needed to do, and particularly thinking about our budget focus, our use of residential care and the number of adolescents who were entering into the care system, which we were a statistical outlier on. We have changed the model and the process over the last few months, implemented in May, and we are now seeing a reduction of adolescents entering into care. It's early days, but we're looking to support those young people at home in their communities. A big element of our children in care and care experience cohort is, of course, making sure that their education is there for them. We know from the work we've done over the last 6 to 8 months that many of our children who have placement instability, who quite often will then end up in residential care, haven't been engaged in their education for some time. So again, it's a full system response, thinking about the role of the virtual school, but also our relationship with alternative provision in the city and our relationship with our heads in terms of inclusion. So again, a set of actions which are detailed in the plan to identify progress. Any good local authority, good children's services, knows it's good because it has effective quality assurance systems in place. You'll know from the Ofsted visit letter in December, released in January, that it said we had more to do, and that was fair. We did have more to do. Positively, since then, we have recruited a number of permanent managers and head of service to this function. We have implemented a new quality assurance framework, which was something we hadn't had for some time. That was launched in April, and we now have month-on-month progress. It is really important that we understand the quality of our social work practice, how we are supporting children, but also what more we need to do to support our staff. We now have monthly processes in place that allows us to understand the quality of outcomes, the quality of decision making, and with a relentless focus through our heads of service, who are all permanent, to make that change stick. And then finally, priority number 6 is around a stable and able workforce. Plymouth, our services in Plymouth are fairly stable from a workforce point of view. However, there is one area of the service that we do see a higher level of staff churn than we would want to see, and that's in the children's safeguarding service, so child in need, child protection, early entrance into care. We've listened to our staff to understand why they're leaving and also what we can do to make them stay and support them in their career. So positively, again, over the last few months, we've now implemented a new assistant social worker role into those teams. Our practitioners said that would help them be better, do more for our children. That has been approved and we're recruiting to those posts now. Really important because those posts become our career pathway for the future so that we generate our succession planning. The other area that we have is around retention payments for staff in that space. This is not uncommon nationally to use a retention measure to attract and retain staff into that space. So we have also agreed that. Beyond that particular area of the service is fairly stable in terms of our social work capacity, but we have absolutely started to look at each area of the service and work with our Dorset colleagues to identify professional development opportunities so we can continue to move our practice on. So the plan is detailed. We are refreshing the plan as we speak, and there will be a more condensed version which have an absolute link to the performance indicators. In the documents you will see that you have a series of performance indicators that measure our direction of travel and measure our progress. They are reviewed each month at the improvement board, and we have from time to time deep dive areas of focus based on relative strengths or performance in that space. So we are, as Councillor Evans said, attending the improvement board each and every month. There's a series and set agenda for improvement, and alongside this improvement activity, we have a clear set of action plans for inspection readiness. Thank you.
Just to add, we are determined to make the improvements that we need, and I think when I speak to staff, when I speak to all members, I think that absolute focus on driving those improvements is there to be seen. We had a meeting with the DFE today as part of a routine set of meetings that we'll have when we are updating them on progress, and that's in addition to the monthly improvement boards, but we'll bring you back regular updates, Leader, to Cabinet. Although there is an improvement board, I think in terms of governance, it's important that you have regular updates here in terms of the progress we're making.
Both Jemima and I attended the DFE meeting today, and also we're on the improvement board as well, just to make sure that, you know, what we explained to the DFE today is that we've had a new administration. They're aware of the political change, but what we were able to assure them was that we were fully behind the plan, fully behind the actions, fully intending to deliver on them. I know it seems as if we've been here forever, but you know, we have a feeling that if we can get this plan right and implemented, you know, there's no reason why we shouldn't go on to race up the league table. But we're way away from that at the moment. What we have to do is concentrate on getting these basics right, and we're going to do that. Okay, thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Jemima. We've got the recommendation, which is to note the improvement plan, the remit and the constitution of the improvement board as well. Is everybody in favour of noting it? Thank you very much. I will now move on to item 15, which is the young carers and substance misuse business case. I think I've got that right. And Mary will be presenting this report. Emma's with us as well to give any advice, colour and texture and all those other things, right? Mary.
Thank you, Leader. This is a business case for the recommissioning of our young carers and substance misuse services for children and young people. Jointly funded by Strategic Commissioning and Public Health, these services provide an important function in the early identification of children and young people experiencing challenges in their lives, either through caring for a family member or through their own difficulties with drugs and alcohol. These services support children to remain with their families and communities, with help to address or manage any caring responsibilities or substance misuse issues. They aim to prevent children and young people needing more intensive and intrusive interventions. Through the commissioning approach, services will be more closely aligned to our early help approach, and the development of family hubs, our first 4 family hubs, were launched in Plymouth last week, with more to follow. So this is very timely in making sure these connections are in place and visible to our families who need them. Thank you, Leader.
Would you like to add anything, Emma?
Yes, thank you, Leader. So we're proposing through this business case to combine 2 young carers related services together, which is our young carers service currently provided by Bernardo's and our affected others service currently provided by Hamos. These support children and young people whose parents have a substance misuse issue themselves. And we hope this, by doing this, will streamline access to support for children who have a caring responsibility. A point in the report I'd like to draw your attention to is the data regarding the number of young carers in the city. In November 2020, we estimated there were 907 children and young people who were young carers, based on the data from our schools. The most recent information identified 599 young carers. Now, we don't believe that there's been a fall in the number of young carers in the city, particularly given the cost of living pressures, housing pressures, and the physical and emotional impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on families. So we think this means there's a risk there are more children and young people who are taking on a caring responsibility but who are hidden from our view. We think they're likely to be worried about what might happen, a fear of what might happen if their caring responsibilities are discovered, or they might just not realise the extent of the caring they take on in their everyday lives, as it's just part of what they've always done in their families. And we know that some of our young carers are as young as 4 and 5 reception age children. We also know these children are more likely to go on to be adult carers, and we want to make sure they have the same opportunities and choices as their peers. So it's really important that our commission services work really closely with colleagues in education, participation and skills and our schools to support the early identification of young carers so that they feel safe, supported and able to come forward and ask for help if they need it.
Okay, well, that sounds like a really, really important thing to do. Do you mind me asking you a daft question? So currently Bernardo's do something and you said
Hamos.
yeah, Hamos has to do something else. putting them together like this, I mean, do you mind me asking, what does that do in terms of providers? Do they compete against each other for this contract now, or do they work together, or what? What happens?
We'd certainly encourage them to work together and other providers as part of the procurement process, not about kind of splitting and dividing, it's bringing them together. And again, that aligns with the family hub approach of our family of providers and partners around the city, so we'd be trying not to wedge between them.
So we're open for a 2 and 2 equal 5 here, if we could. Yeah. Okay. Everybody okay with that? It sounds the right way to go, doesn't it? It's worrying, isn't it? Not having that, to see that the numbers drop like that. That's really worrying, and hopefully we'll discover why soon. Okay, so the recommendations, 1, 2, and 3, are laid out in the papers. Can I see all those in favour, please? Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, I think that's the end of the meeting, which some of you might be pleased to know is 20 minutes before we thought we would end. So congratulations to everybody for their brevity. Thank you for your attendance, and we'll see you all again next time.